Welcome to TAP, everyone. Today we are talking about awakening the below. And I want to share with you that I feel truly led to this path, to this book, to this topic. I feel that this book found me in a way. Moments of divine timing where something just lands in your hands because you're ready for it. And that's how I feel. And we are going to dive in today with our guest, talking about what the below means. But I just want to start off by saying that I am such a below kind of person. And I'm so happy that we're going to talk about this because I feel it's a really good model of spirituality. But when I say that I'm a below kind of person, because it has to do with everything that I do actually. Evolutionary astrology is a very eighth housey thing. I talk about eighth house a lot, and that is a below place in our chart in astrology terms. And the trauma work that I do, it's so this is right up my alley. And yeah, I just want to say that I feel really some kind of synchronization here, that I was given the opportunity to do this interview. So now let me welcome you, Oholomo.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are the author of Awakening the Below, and with the subtitle Navigating Through Darkness and Spiritual Emergency.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, And I mean, do you want to maybe just first say to the listeners, because some people find this only on their audio platform and they don't know the difference, but a lot of people also find it on YouTube and they are maybe used to seeing our images. Do you maybe want to say something about how it's important for you maybe not to be seen?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on and looking forward to our conversation. Yeah, so I guess the reason that I'm not showing my face is there's also Oholomo is like a pen name or a spiritual name and not my own personal name. The reason I'm making that choice is because I think it's really important to have this material and this information put out there without centering me as a person and without having me kind of be, known as a teacher of this material or have me be the center of the focus of the attention. So really the material is kind of an offering that I'm making and putting out there for people to engage with. Really kind of mapping the below and mapping out some practices that people could use and then providing resources for people to be able to follow up on, but without really presenting myself as a guide or a teacher in this particular endeavor. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
um, it's it's more of a kind of something that's passing through me and not really kind of owned by me. So to not have my name attached to it, my personal name attached to it is, I think,
Yeah,
the best
not your
way.
name and not your image, your external image. I like that. It's like a spiritual principle in a way.
Yeah, and I'm not. I mean, I've published this book called Awakening the Below, and it's published through a publisher, and so that means I probably make, I don't know, maybe $1 if that on each copy. So it's not. I'm sure it's not going to be a New York Times bestseller. So this is not about making money.
Mm.
I don't have any courses. I don't have any workshops or anything that I'm
Mm.
selling, other than the book itself. It's really just the focus is really just on the information and not on any kind of commercial endeavor, any kind of personality, any kind of presenting myself as an expert or a teacher or a guru or anything like that. So yeah,
I
that just
really,
helps me to keep that focus
yeah,
on
yeah.
more
Okay, so
pure.
it's more pure. Helps
Yeah.
you to keep that focus. I really, really appreciate that. It it rings true with me for sure. I think it's a quite a Piscean thing to relate it to astrology. Yeah, I I really yeah I like that. I think because it's the pendulum has swung so much to the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So it's like everyone has something to sell and want to be seen. So yeah, it's quite nice. I want to just begin with a quote from your book to introduce people to what are we talking about with the below.
Mm.
So in the introduction, you say that the purpose of this book is to help people recognize the signs of the below when they appear, to navigate this territory more confidently, and to fully integrate these experiences into their spiritual development in a healthy and meaningful way.
Mm.
So maybe we should start talking about this model of spirituality that you have and that you call awakening the below.
Yeah, sure. Um, so awakening the below is in contrast to awakening the above.
Yeah.
And this model of spirituality that I'm proposing is it's my own language for describing something that I think might be already out there in other forms and other traditions and in other ways of speaking. Um, but I feel that this distinction between above and below is often an area of tension and misunderstanding. And so, what I've tried to do is kind of put some new language around this and hopefully maybe bring a little bit of clarity to this distinction. When I talk about awakening the above, I'm talking about traditions of spirituality and experiences of spirituality that relate to transcendence. So it relates to kind of going up and out from the human up into the whether it's the divine, up into the astral, up into the enlightenment, up into the crown chakra. There's lots of different ways of speaking about this. Up into the heavens, up to, Christ consciousness, raising one's consciousness upwards. There's lots and lots of language and imagery of, the sky and the sun and light and heavenly bodies and so forth. And the characteristics of this kind of spirituality are often about transcending the human experience, transcending our pain, transforming suffering, ending suffering, um, cultivating love and divine qualities and peacefulness and emptiness, really leaving the human behind, the human body, the human emotions behind, and transcending and becoming something like a Buddha or something like a Jesus or another figure, who is a master of the above, meaning transcended the human condition altogether and become like a divine sort of figure
Sounds like
of
something you would want,
compassion.
right? To like
Sure.
transcend the pain, right? So immediately it sounds
Absolutely.
good to us. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And so much of our spirituality really is organized around this principle. So, pretty much I think, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, a lot of these traditions that are both part of sort of global historical spiritual practice, but then also the ways that we have adapted and modified and kind of mixed these together in the modern period. Um, this is a form of spirituality that really speaks to people, and it's a form of spirituality that many people experience an awakening through this form of spirituality, and they have these experiences for themselves in very real ways. So, what I'm talking about here, I should say this from the beginning. I'm not interested really in sort of like philosophy. I'm speaking here about, you know, authentic spiritual, mystical experiences that people are actually experiencing for themselves, right? So awakening the above happens for people all the time within these kinds of spiritual communities and spiritual techniques. People have these kinds of experiences, and they're glorious and they're amazing. And I am not in no way detracting at all from those kinds of experiences or from those kinds of models or practice practices that people do, like meditation and prayer and chanting and all sorts of other things. So I want to start by just acknowledging all of that's amazing, and I am in no way critiquing it whatsoever. Um, but that's just awakening the above. And there's a
Yeah.
whole other dimension to awakening that
Yeah.
sometimes people cultivate intentionally. They're drawn towards it and they cultivate it intentionally. And often this below awakens spontaneously and surprisingly. And when that happens, and it's very disorienting because people are expecting the above and they get the below. And then it can be very, we can talk about this,
Mm.
as a source of anxiety and stress
Mm.
and spiritual emergency and fear. But some people are just oriented towards the below and cultivate the below, and they're attracted towards the below, and so for them, it's not surprising. Um, so when I'm talking about the below, I'm talking about a whole different orientations. It's not about transcendence. It's not about up and out from the human condition. Instead, it's about going down and in,
Mm.
down into the suffering, the vulnerability, the embodied, the natural, the physical, down into the earthiness, the blood and gutsiness
Mm.
of being a human, being an animal,
Mm.
being part of this earth. And so the goal isn't to transcend. The goal isn't to become some kind of you know, being of light, some heavenly kind of compassionate, um, loving, completely equanimous being, but rather it's to fully embody and fully experience what it means to be part of this physical realm, and then and then even further down into the earth and into the a lot of experiences relate to you know the not only the physical body and the emotions and the traumas and so on and so forth of being alive, but getting down into the ways that the earth itself is conscious, the way that there are different nature spirits and different kinds of beings that we can that can pass through us, that we can relate to, the kind of the energies of the earth and the ways that those form us, and um, really really deeply inhabiting all of these dimensions of this very earthly physical existence. So it's a whole different orientation. It's a different direction of spirituality, different practices, different kinds of experiences, different kinds of traditions, different kinds of symbols. And again, it's not to say that one's better than the other. I'm not arguing that the below is right and the above is wrong or vice versa. I'm just pointing out that these two different directions are often in conflict in our spiritual communities and in our approaches. Um, People often really kind of adhere to one and negate the other. And so the
Mm.
below has been negated and demonized in many ways by the above traditions. The below, the realm of suffering is equated with evil, and it's equated with sin, and it's equated with
Mm.
um, ignorance and delusion, by these different traditions. Um, and so the book is really, it's really ultimately the book is talking about the integration of the two. It's ultimately
Yeah.
the goal is to move in both directions, above and
Yeah.
below,
Yeah.
and to really deeply experience both, and to bring the knowledge and the wisdom from both above and below back into the middle, which is what I call sort of everyday life and
Mm.
relationships, and um, just our communities, our conversations with each other.
Mm.
So the goal is really to be fluent in both the above and the below, and to allow these blessings from both to flow into the middle. But that's the goal. But this book is focused on how to really safely, comfortably, confidently navigate the below,
Mm.
particularly if you've found yourself there um, through some surprising kind of opening. You know, you were, let's say, really focused on meditation, and you're really focused on, compassion, and you're moving, and you have an idea of spirituality as being moving in this transcendent direction, and you're really, above focused. And then suddenly you find yourself thrown into the below. Suddenly you find yourself in a, um, in a kind of experience that's very difficult to understand within your current framework of spirituality, and you're confused by that, and maybe your community is denigrating your experiences. That's the kind of reader that I have in mind for this book, where it's a book to help you get oriented and help you understand what's happening, and help you to pick up some practices that can help you to navigate that
Mm.
that that below territory. Um,
Yeah.
but but the book would also, I think, be interesting for people who were naturally oriented in that direction to begin with. People who are kind of interested in things like shamanism, and more earthly religions, indigenous traditions, Jungian psychology, IFS, other kinds of forms
Exactly. Yeah.
of spiritual practice that are kind of below oriented, which we can talk in more detail about. But if people are
Yes.
interested in those kinds of things and feel drawn in that direction, this book could also maybe be a map of the territory that might be useful. Even if you're not having a spiritual emergency, right? So
Yeah.
it could be something interesting for different kinds of readers.
Well,
And even if
like,
you're just oriented towards the above, you might just pick it up because it's just kind of interesting to see, you know,
what's below?
what other options are out there. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Like, I made a big deal in the beginning saying, I feel this was just landed at me, and it's so in a way I say, but I was already there. But this is, I like that you are simplifying this in a way, saying above and below, and then all of a sudden I can see all the traditions relating to either or in a way. And of course we
Yeah.
need to integrate, but also I think it's really needed what you're talking about to figure out how to orient in the below, because one thing is to be here and what I call the eighth house, but then how are we here, right? And so I want to go into to exactly IFS that you just mentioned, and to the listeners who may not know, but I've done several about internal family systems, so you can find those if you want to know what IFS is. But you mentioned that in your book. Let me actually just quote you. Is that okay with copyright and everything?
Oh yeah, please do,
Okay.
because then I know exactly what you're talking
what?
about that I
What?
said.
Okay, good. What is he talking about? Okay, so it's for this quote where you say, "What's ultimately going on here? Are we discovering various autonomous aspects of the unconscious, as Jungians would argue? Are we uncovering a collection of protective and wounded inner parts, as they might put it in internal family systems? Are we engaging with independent beings that are wholly external to ourselves, as most indigenous worldviews would say?" And so these are open questions
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
mentioned, but I am really curious about the IFS part, because that is a therapeutic model, to say at least, that I follow. I do feel that it's very, I can align it very well with spirituality, and yeah, like you also say in your book that some are are maybe more prone to feeling energies, and others are prone to feeling entities. And so I do feel that these parts in internal family systems, that they can feel like entities for sure when they
Yeah.
take over us, when we feel we are them, all of that. So let me know what you think about the IFS and the below.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so let me start just by that entities energies thing that you just mentioned. So this is an observation that I've made that I talk about in the book, which is that it seems like people experience the below in these two different ways, and many people sort of lean to one side or the other, and many people kind of experience both. So, um, the language or the framework or the kinds of experiences that people have of the below are often framed in terms of, energies, like being able to feel certain kinds of energies in certain kinds of spaces or places, or connecting with energies or feeling energies flowing through you and so forth, is one kind of language. Another kind of language is experiencing, yeah, like entities, experiencing beings that are coming and relating to you more as autonomous kind of external, spirits or ghosts or beings of some kind like that. And it could be alien beings or astral beings or whatever. Um, so that seems to me to be kind of more a product of how you yourself are configured rather than what's actually ultimately going on. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
um I feel like we have maybe filters is a good word. We have these filters that are part of our minds and part of the way that we relate to the world. We have these filters that were constructed from our beliefs and from our cultures and from our previous experiences and maybe from books we've read and podcasts we've listened to it and so forth and so on. And we have these, these ways of seeing these filters in place that influence how we interpret our experiences. And so um, I think the point of these open questions, that you just read in the book anyway, the what I'm saying in that part of the book is that the book isn't really about answering those kinds of questions. It's not really about sort of making an argument about what is underneath the filters. It's
Mm.
not really about sort of establishing, oh, what is the ultimate truth here? The book is really about our experience, right? Our experience as humans, regardless of what we think the ultimate reason for this is. As human beings, we tend to have certain kinds of experiences where we feel these vibes or these invisible connections. We feel the presence of these entities or beings around us. Um, and the book doesn't establish sort of a worldview or a philosophy that you have to believe in about what is ultimately going on here. So these open questions are kind of pointing out different ways that certain traditions have phrased or framed or understood or described these kinds of experiences.
Yeah.
IFS having its parts, and
Mm.
Jungian psychology having its transpersonal or archetypal or archetypes, right?
Mm.
Shamanism and indigenous traditions engage with spirits as entities,
Totally. So my
and
question is really like outside of the book in a way, kind of
yeah.
asking you about. So since you mentioned IFS, like are you into it? Do you know about it? What?
Yeah, so the book and the kind of, so I talk in the book a lot about experiences that I've had, and there's a number of friends of mine whose stories are also quoted in the book, and so there's kind of focused on um describing different ways that people have experienced different parts of the below. And it sounds like when you read the book, it might sound like, my experiences were very organized and very kind of like sensible because they fit into the book in certain chapters and certain places. But all of that is my own processing of that after the fact. So the whole
Yeah.
book was written after this, transformation in the below took place. And it's really sort of like me in retrospect thinking about things that happened, and organizing those experiences into a kind of a model, into a kind of a framework, and then connecting that framework with other things that I've read.
Right.
um so at the time that I was having these experiences, my own I knew nothing about IFS,
Okay.
and at the moment I know very little about IFS, although I know it exists, and I've read,
Okay.
a couple things,
Yeah.
a couple books by some of the main proponents. But so for me at the time, I was much more within a more shamanic framework. And so, when I would articulate to myself what was happening, when I thought about what was happening, for me, the language of spirits, engaging with entities was it made that made a lot of sense to me.
Mm.
Um, but when I, compare that with what's going on in IFS and what, from what I know about IFS, um, I see so many similarities there
Yeah.
between the kinds of shamanic framings that I was more familiar with, and IFS. I think the main difference is that in IFS, the presumption always is that you're dealing with parts of yourself, whereas in shamanism, the presumption is always that you're, uh, not always, but most of the time, the presumption is that you're dealing with external entities.
Mm.
And so there's, maybe a question of, um, ultimately what's going on here, being different between the two traditions. But I would say, in the spirit of what I was saying earlier about not necessarily making any claims about what's
Yeah.
ultimately going on. The actual techniques that you use to engage, whether it's with parts or with spirits, the actual techniques are very similar.
Mm.
It's about honoring the presence of these entities or parts. It's about listening to what they have to teach us. It's about, maybe making offerings or gifts that welcome them into the whole, right? It's about relating to them in ways that are, um, relational and not super hierarchical, and we're not trying to kind of control or manage these things. Rather, we're inviting them to, inhabit their rightful place within the within the whole, and to hear their voices. Um, so a lot of, I think, the basic orientations and a lot of the kind of essential practices could be quite similar. Um,
Yeah,
if we
no,
put
but
the philosophies aside, there's a lot of
yeah,
similarities.
I like that point. Put the philosophies aside, and then, but I like that you do that. You're opening up for what this is, and I think it is narrowing it in and limiting it.
Yeah.
If we say it is only part of your psyche, and we always assume these are child parts of you, and I really like the idea that it can be all sorts of other things, spirits,
Yeah.
and whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it. And you
Yeah. I make a,
also, yeah.
oh, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. I make a point at a certain place in the book to talk about different styles of thinking about what's going on, and make a distinction between the kind of thinking that wants to narrow down the possibilities and explain to arrive
Mm.
at an explanation, versus the kind of thinking that wants to expand out and find more and more possibilities, right? So, I give a couple examples in that section about, events, kind of synchronicitous events that have taken place in my life, and um the difference between jumping to a conclusion, or really wanting to think it through, to collapse it into, oh, this is what that means, or oh, this is what that is, which will narrow the whole experience down into one thing versus, let me keep an open mind about what this is and just kind of engage with it and see where it takes me. And my thought process can be more associative, kind of like gathering more and more metaphors or symbols or associations and really kind of just letting my mind go wild with different kinds of drawing different kinds of connections or drawing different kinds of ideas together without necessarily settling on any one interpretation. And just the richness of that kind of approach, where it gets you, in contrast to collapsing the possibilities down into one explanation.
Mhm.
So anyway, yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah.
I think an important kind of distinction that you're pointing to there.
I think it is because, I work as a therapist, and um, I mean, I like having that openness with my clients because, um, as a therapist, you always have a hypothesis in your mind, whether you want to recognize it or not. You always have some idea of what's going on, and so the greater that idea is, the more open it is, that idea. Um, yeah, I think the more healing can happen, and also for myself as a client, I appreciate a very open mind, so that you
Yeah.
can explore what's going on with me. And I want to ask you about a thing you call, when the body comes alive as its own autonomous, intelligent being. And I mean, I guess it's related to what people know about how the body is intelligent, but there's a little more to it when you talk about it. I feel it's like that's when we are in a meditative space. You talk about it. Is that? Can you say
Yeah.
something about this with the body coming alive?
Yeah, sure. So the book kind of leads you on an exploration of the below that goes deeper and deeper into the below, layer by layer by layer. And not necessarily, it's not necessary that everybody experiences all of these things. It's not necessarily that you experience them in this order, but it's sort of like a tour of the different aspects of the below. And one of the aspects of the below, as you're descending down into the below, one of the things that unfolds or that opens up is this intelligence of the body. It's what the body knows that the mind can't necessarily grasp, right? It's what the body has to communicate with us that the mind can't necessarily hear.
Ah, yeah,
And how do we how do we allow the body to communicate those things to us? How do we allow the body to speak to us in that way? And for some people, it's going to be about energies. It's going to be about feeling certain kinds of energies. It's going to be about allowing energies that have lain dormant in the body to come forward. But then for other people, the more kind of entities style people, they might feel like the body itself is an alien being, like the body itself has a spirit or a soul or a consciousness
yeah,
that's somehow autonomous, that's somehow operating autonomously, that's somehow becoming alive and communicating itself and what it wants. So different people can experience this, I think, through more energetic or more entity kind of kind of ways. But essentially, this is about the body. Either way, it's about the body becoming free from the restrictions that the egoic mind has been placing on it.
Mm.
The body really wanting to express itself in ways that maybe the ego has not allowed it to, or has repressed, or has denied, and the body wanting to become liberated to be able to live and experience and feel what it wants to. Um,
Mm.
so, this can be devastating for the ego because it can completely overturn what we thought about ourselves, what we've been trying, how we've been trying to manage ourselves. The ego thinks it's in charge of the body and thinks it can control the body and,
Mm.
sculpt the body to be certain ways. And this is about the body kind of unleashing
Mm.
itself and being free to express itself. And and often kind of like the first thing the body wants to do, there's two things I think the body wants to do right away as soon as it starts to wake up like this. And the first two things it wants to do are, one is to express its sensuality. So that can come through, like if you've been repressing or denying or controlling sexual, uh, you know, expressions, or if you've been kind of like, really closely managing what your body eats, or how it wants to, how it behaves, and so on and so forth. Like it could really just explode, and surprise you in the kinds of things that the body wants to do,
Mm.
to sort of like explore the realm of sensory, sensual pleasure. Like you might want, the body wants to eat certain things and wants to, express itself in certain ways. And, maybe it wants to move, maybe it wants to dance, it wants to feel things that it hasn't felt before. And so there's kind of like an explosion of, creativity and dynamism of the body in that sense. And then another thing that it also wants to do as soon as it starts to wake up is to unload itself from the burdens of the traumas that it's
Yeah.
been carrying. And that just might be, the body just might want to curl up in a ball and cry for, a
Mm.
while. It might want to, um, it might need to process these, hidden, deeply hidden wounds that the ego has been trying to cover up and paper over. And the
Mm.
body might want to, um, it will want to unleash those, liberate those. And that can often be, both of these can often be disorienting. And the opening of the traumas can really be, very difficult in terms of just physical symptoms, you know, stomach aches and headaches and pains in the body and all kinds of different sorts of, dysregulated experiences that one can have as this liberation process, or this unleashing process, takes place.
And see,
Um,
now we are not just talking about being fascinated with an underworld. We're talking about, in concrete terms, what do we do with this underworld, right? So
yeah,
instead of, and you can correct me, but this is how I hear you. Instead of disidentifying with the trauma, instead of just accepting that it's there, but you kind of relate, or you identify, you find yourself in a sense of unity with cosmos and with everything. Then you say you go into it, you go into the
yeah,
body and into the pain.
yeah.
Stay there.
That's precisely the difference between above and below, right? So in the above, my pain, my trauma, either I face it like the Buddha, which is like I'm totally equanimous, and this pain is just an impermanent sensation passing through my consciousness, and really actually I'm, kind of transcending above it all. Or meeting the pain like Jesus, which is like, this pain is like part of this cosmic divine oneness, right? The pain is like, somehow, um, part of this field of compassion and love of the divine, right? So these are very above kind of approaches. Yeah, and this is different. Yeah, this is going down into suffering, sitting with suffering,
Mhm.
really allowing suffering to be there, allowing the suffering to just work its way through the body, not because we're going to get rid of the suffering, but because suffering is part of what it means to be human,
Mhm.
right? These animal bodies of ours have pain and they have suffering, and it's a part of being alive. And
Yes.
so the body, in waking up and in becoming autonomous and liberated to express itself, right? The body will explore both the extremes of pleasure and the extremes of suffering, right? It has to be both, because both are part of our body's experiencing.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. And so I just got that question earlier when you were talking about the body. How do I know that this is now the body? Because I'm in my body every day, right? How do I know that this is the actual autonomous body that wants to eat this, and not just another part of me that's like, I want to have something that's not healthy to eat? You know, how do I know
Yeah.
that this is my actual primitive body?
Yeah. Um, yeah. So what I'm talking about in the book is, you know, in in a process of awakening where the below just opens up. Um, you can't think yourself through it, right? You can't
Mm,
think yourself down into the body. The mind will want to do that.
mm,
It'll try to do that, but what will happen is it'll be, the mind will be guiding the way down into the body, and so
mm,
that it will be an entirely mentally led process, right? So what
mm,
I'm talking about in the book is like, the body just wakes up,
mm.
and the mind is taken by surprise by that, and maybe doesn't like what it sees, right?
Right.
But the body wakes up, exerts its autonomous will, right? it
Yeah,
just
that's
it just it just takes charge, and then suddenly you're having these experiences that you would rather not be having.
yeah. But I recognize that. I recognize that from therapy, working with parts where one thing is talking about them, knowing of them, knowing your internal landscape, and then there's that when you actually go inside and then you're like, oh, what happened? Hey, why did I say that? What happened? So I guess I think that's similar to what you're talking about, that the mind is surprised
Yeah.
by it.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of practices, so one thing we haven't talked about yet is the so the book has I what I talk about in the book is psychedelic practices, and I don't mean just psychedelic
Drugs.
um drugs there, although that could be something that fits into this category. I actually personally don't have a lot of experience with psychedelic drugs, so when I'm talking about my experiences, I'm talking about the psychedelic effects of other kinds of practices like meditation, different kinds of yogas. Those tend towards more above style experiences. But things like drumming and ecstatic movement, dancing, trance, kind of being able to, training yourself to enter into different kinds of trances, visualization practices, things like active imagination practice from, it's more of a Jungian style practice. These
Mm,
kinds of, or shamanic journeying, which is something I did a lot of. These kinds of things are um, psychedelic in the sense that they really kind of like um, they break through the barrier that the ego sets up around reality in order to kind of control what one is experiencing and to maintain order over what one is experiencing, right? The ego creates these kind of barriers, um, filters out certain kinds of experiences, does not allow
Mm,
us to have certain kinds of experiences
for
because they
sure.
would be destabilizing,
Yeah.
right? And so these practices, I think different practices work for different people. That's my kind of observation, is that not everybody's going to get the same mileage out of the same practices. But what's important is having some set of practices that work for you that lower this ego defense barrier, and allow you to experience some of these things. And so, um, a practice for the body we were just talking about might be, for example, the ecstatic dancing is pretty good for this, where you know have some kind of movement in your body that can be detached from the mind controlling it. So some kind of like spontaneous sort of rhythmic movement that your body's doing in sort of you know an uncontrolled way. So your
Yeah.
mind, if you get into it deeply enough, maybe the right kind of drum track, maybe the right kind of movements, you could experiment with them. But let's say you're able to kind of go into a little bit of a trance state, which would mean sort
Yeah.
of setting aside the ego and the control over the body and just allowing the body to express itself through those movements, right? And that's
Yeah.
just kind of like a way of allowing the body to kind of explore and just have autonomy. And you might find yourself moving in weird ways, right? That the ego would be embarrassed about, or the
Yeah.
ego would think were strange, and the ego would not want you to do. But your body starts to explore these movements and starts to explore things in
So
ways
so
that it
that's
wants to.
yeah, so the way that it wants to, so that's really an answer to if you want something very concrete, how do I call forth my autonomous body spirit? Well,
Yeah.
something like that free kind of dancing
So
is
it's
good.
it's like you give it, it's like you set up a practice that has that psychedelic effect, by which I mean
Yeah.
it kind of gets you out of the ego and
Yeah.
puts that barrier down. And then you just allow, or you invite even, whatever is going to happen
Yeah.
to come forward, right? So it's a lot less directed. It's not like I'm going to sit here and find a way to explore my body's, autonomy and intelligence, right?
Right.
Because that's a mentally driven exercise. So really, it's
Yeah.
about, okay, how do I get this? How do I get this mind of mine to sort of, move to the side and just allow the body to do its thing? And if you're an energies kind of person, I could say that, like, you set aside the ego and you allow just the energy to flow through your body, right? If you're an entities kind of person, it would make more sense for me to say you set your ego aside and then allow your body to become possessed, right?
Yes.
So
Let's be possessed.
yeah, yeah. So you know, the language, different people will resonate with different
Yeah.
language. Different people resonate with different practices in order to do that. But that's the idea, is that your ego cedes control, and the body, like some kind of autonomous um, intelligence, takes over.
Mm.
And in the example I was giving of ecstatic dancing, it's just movement,
Yeah.
but that can lead to, that ecstatic dancing, spontaneous movement can lead to the exploration of the sensuality and the trauma and pain and suffering that I was talking about earlier.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think a lot of people can relate to ecstatic dancing or whatever you want to call it, free flow. It comes in different forms. And
Yeah.
so that's a good starting point, and then it can develop from there.
Yeah.
Um Oholomo, I do have a few more questions for you. Are you up for that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have
Uh,
time, so
okay,
we
good.
can be here as long as you want. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, I have two more, and then we have some astrology. So, I feel like this is a really important one, and I love that you comment
Yeah.
on it. And I'm curious to hear what you just want to say about it now. And that is about the fear of losing our sanity with this.
Yeah.
because you also talk about what lie on the other side of the abyss. I'm kind of connecting this because you're talking about like the ego and the mind walls to come down, and then what do we have? What is there, right? This is our construct of reality and of ourselves, and what I mean, I definitely have it in myself, that fear of losing my sanity, more so in the past, but I think it could definitely still be found, and I found it often with my clients, and I think that has to do with our history, our history of how we have treated mentally ill people, right? Just lock them up, drug them up, whatever, things that are worse than that. So I think this is a fear a lot of people resonate with. What if I lose my sanity? And I think actually I don't have a lot of experience with psychedelics as well, just like a few times. But that I think that's the same fear that's keeping me from it. Actually, it's like I don't need to go there because I feel close to becoming insane anyway, just as I
Mm.
am.
Yeah. That's a big topic. Um, so yeah, so let me start just by defining what I mean by the abyss.
Yeah.
So far we only went down one layer into the body and into the intelligence of the body, but the below continues below the body. I was mentioning down into the earth. So, past the body, deeper down into the below. There's my personal body, right? Which is one thing, and then there's the, you could say, like the earth body, right? The biological, the Gaia, the ecological body, right? How my body is part of this whole kind of network of living beings that rise out of the earth,
Mm.
right? And so there's also in the same way that you step aside the ego and the personal body becomes autonomously, intelligently present, that process continues down into the earth body, right? This whole web of biological life on earth becomes autonomously intelligent. Um, and again, that can be energies or spirits, energies or entities. Um, beyond that, there's also kind of the whole symbolic, archetypal, transpersonal realm of symbols and dreams, and there's a whole world that can become alive there. There's ancestral, the ancestry of this body, the ancestry, the long, deep lines of ancestors that have come before me and have shaped me. That can become alive and autonomously present. Ancestral spirits and energies and so forth. Um, and as you sort of like open up all of these different aspects of the below, the ego is realizing more and more how little is actually in its control. It thought it was in charge of everything, right? It thought it was the one in the driver's seat. It thought that it was the one that was keeping you safe, that it was, controlling reality. But as the whole below starts to kind of open up, it's like the ego is revealed to have been kind of a myth, or kind of like an illusion that you had any control whatsoever, right?
Mm.
um it turns out there's so much of who you are that is being driven by these autonomous forces, right, that are beyond the ego's control. The ego's been trying to control them, but but when they're unleashed and liberated, the ego's job becomes less and less and less. um, central. And
Mm.
at a certain point, I think this sooner or later, for many people, this leads to a kind of a panic sort of situation where the ego just panics. Um,
Yeah.
and for some people, that's a fear of death, a fear of annihilation, a fear of, it could be any number of different kind of core fears. And one version of that is the fear of just madness, the fear of just kind of like complete loss of control
Yeah.
and madness, right? And these are the core fears that drive the ego's function, right? The ego's whole reason for existence is to keep these core fears at bay. And at a certain point in this below process, you just face this abyss of fear where the ego is just in a sheer panic. I'm describing an extreme situation that,
Yeah.
some people don't experience in quite such stark terms, but many people do have this sort of fear, this abyss of fear, at the bottom of the below.
Mm.
You know, exploring, is sometimes fun and sometimes adventuresome. It sometimes feels like a great, journey. Um, but sooner or later, this journey becomes quite dark, quite scary as you hit the core fear. Um, and so the yeah, this fear of madness, um, could also be quite real. I mean, the stakes are pretty high.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
somebody could. So I'm not like so in the book I say, that there's lots of warnings, lots of caveats, lots of advice for people to reach out to therapists and other kinds of specialists.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say that navigating the below is completely safe.
Mm.
Um, it's not. They're clearly dangers in
Mm.
this kind of thing. But what I do want to say is just because you're having below type experiences doesn't mean you've gone mad, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it could be dangerous, but it also could be quite rewarding. And so I think what happens is that people start to experience a little bit of the below and just automatically assume they've gone mad, and that has a lot to do with, like you said, with modern psychiatry's kind of, just dismissal, complete dismissal and demonization of the below, right? We don't have space in the modern West for things like trance or possession or, you know, autonomous bodily intelligence and the kinds of things that I'm talking about here. We don't have space in our modern culture for, actually talking with your ancestors through,
Mm.
um, through rituals. We don't have space in our culture, for these things. Whereas indigenous people, as well as, even in the Western, pagan Europe and you and we do have this in our history. We did have space for this kind of world before, but we don't now. So as soon as you start to see, the ghost of your grandparent or something, you just jump to the conclusion, I must be mad. I must need medication. I must need to be hospitalized, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that there aren't dangers, but I'm also but I am saying, just because you've experienced the below, just because you're on a journey into the below doesn't mean you're bad. Um,
Mm.
and and so, I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm everything I'm saying is, coming from the perspective of a spiritual explorer and
Yeah.
not from a, professional, mental health expert. But um, my argument is that the mental health paradigm that we have in the modern West is too narrow.
It
That
is.
there's a spectrum of experiences that we have not made space for. that are actually extremely important, transformative spiritual experiences,
Yeah.
if you know how to navigate them well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like all the labels, okay, then that is anxiety. Okay. And that covers a lot of symptoms. But then that's anxiety. And then you can follow this manual almost uh, to deal with that anxiety rather than what I hear you proposing, opening that just right up to, that could be many things,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. And, and I'm not here to tell people not to take their medication.
Sure.
I'm not saying don't get help when you need it. I'm not saying anything
No, no,
remotely like that.
no.
But what I am saying is that, you know, um, fear, trauma, pain, suffering, that these are part of the path. They are part of the spiritual path.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the below, it's we're not trying to eradicate these experiences. We're trying to fully inhabit them and really like allow them to speak to us and allow ourselves to experience and learn the wisdom of these kinds of states, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about just escaping, you know, whether through medication or meditation. It's not about escaping these experiences. So,
Yeah.
but of course, for some people, those kinds of experiences will be so overwhelming, they will become dysfunctional. They need to have proper mental health care
Sure.
and medication, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I don't want to be misheard or
Not at
misunderstood
all.
as
And I'm
dismissing that.
like you wrote the book, but I feel I'm saying it together with you. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? This is so, it's not. I'm saying it as well, and it's not. And I don't feel it's saying anything at all about whether to have medication or not. It's just it's again with perspective and with the filter you were talking about. So if I can only see it from this medical lens, then there's just so much potential that's lost for us to really connect with who we are and why we're here.
that's
So
it. Yep.
that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's
I,
right. And so I'm
I
offering an upgrade to your filter, right? With this
yes,
book, it's like, you know, it, and you can, it's just a suggestion because I'm not saying it's ultimate truth, right? So you can just take it or leave it. As a reader, you have, the autonomy to be able to say, I disagree with this, and that's totally fine. But yeah, if you do approach the book as like a filter upgrade, right? As a,
mm,
you know, a way of expanding your interpretations of what's going on, to be
yeah,
able to accommodate a wider range of experiences, and see the value, see the you know the real value of engaging with these kinds of experiences.
exactly. And I feel that's what different models are doing. This is you call it a model of spirituality. That's what I feel different therapeutic models are doing. For me, it's like giving me extra eyes in a way.
Yeah,
I can see it this way as well, and then get experiences in that direction.
yeah, yeah,
I wanted to hear you about one more quote, um, where you say, "If you feel trapped in the below right now, if you feel trapped there, try not to worry too much. It's just a sign that you haven't gotten to the bottom yet, quite yet." And I was curious about that, not that you haven't gotten to the bottom quite yet, because I've worked with substance abusers, and that's actually something that you can use as a bit of an excuse for yourself. Like you have to hit rock bottom before you want to
oh,
start in
right,
rehab. So
right,
that
right,
was
right.
just my little association. So I was curious. Um, and also for listeners who feel at the below. I mean, it's really dark in the season that we're recording in parts of the world anyway, and so depression can seem very close by.
Yeah, 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 so I don't know too much about recovery, but yeah, I understand what you're saying, the idea of rock bottom, and I think actually this is a little bit different. I don't know. You tell me. So the idea here is that the idea is mainly that you can't rush this process
Mm,
of this alchemical process that's taking place in the below, this transformation where, setting the ego aside, more and more of the below becomes alive, more and more of it becomes, awakened. Um, you arrive at this abyss of fear, and you pass through the abyss of fear. And on the other side of that abyss, when you've seen the very, very, very bottom of the below, the past the core fear, what you discover there is so profoundly transformative
mm,
that it makes sense of the entire process that you've been through. You see how every single piece of the journey has been absolutely necessary. And you see how your journey through the below has come to a conclusion. You see, oh, that's what this was all about. And you make that discovery, and the journey through the below, this descent into the below at that moment is complete.
mm,
And what happens is, very naturally, with no effort whatsoever, it becomes completely clear that it's now time to bring what you discovered in the below back up to the middle, which is ordinary daily life, communication with friends and family and other people, and your job and your sort of ordinary world, society, and everything else, right? So that moment, that turn from descent down into the abyss, and then what I call the return, is where you where you find the thing that is at the bottom of the below, and you return back with that thing. Um, that turnaround and return is completely natural, completely spontaneous, cannot be rushed, cannot be premeditated. You cannot imagine what you will find at the
mm,
bottom. And so you cannot just decide, oh, I found something, I'm just going to take that back and turn
mm,
around and go back. So what I'm saying there in that quote is, if you find yourself stuck in the below, if it feels difficult, if the journey feels like it's, becoming more difficult, or it feels like it's stagnating,
yeah.
um, don't worry, because that just means you haven't gotten to the end quite yet. Because when you do get to the end, it'll just spontaneously become so obvious what needs to be done, and the return will just happen naturally.
And could okay, so I have two questions in one because
Yeah.
um you you sent me a photo that I want the listeners to see as well. So maybe you could explain that statue a little
Yeah.
bit. I think it has to do with this. And then my question is also, could it be something relational that you're going through? I mean, just to get some example, could it be like, oh, I'm struggling with my relationships? Could that be, where you're walking around in the below, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah, I think relationships of all kinds are reconfigured and re-evaluated through this awakening the below process. Um, I think most people's relationships, I talk about the middle. The middle is just ordinary life and ordinary kind of relationships, and, family and friends and work and things like that. When that's all ego driven, when that's all the function of this scared protective wall that is doing all of the actions in the middle, those relations are working in certain ways according to certain logics that make sense to the ego. And when you're in this below process and the ego is learning how little of life is under its control and how much of who you thought you were is actually autonomous, um, those relationships are bound to change. And who knows what that will look like, because who knows exactly what your specific situation
Sure.
is.
But
But
is that figure,
the,
does that represent that as well, that figure,
so
the
um
descendant?
yeah, let me talk about that in one sec. So yeah, I was just gonna say the relationships that you have, if they've been completely founded on ego, um, and suddenly you discover, that this, I don't know, this, autonomy of the body, you've discovered, um, you know, I've repressed the fact that my body wants to be gay.
Yeah.
Suddenly that's going to change your marriage, right? Or
Right.
I have discovered that the whole reason that I have this relationship with this other person is acting out some trauma from my past, right? And so that's going to change that relationship. Maybe I'm not saying it changes them for the better or the worse or what, but there are going to be changes in your
Yeah.
relationships as you unpack your ancestry, your family, your relation with your family will change for sure. um, as you unpack the connections with the earth, your relationship with, what you do for your living, what you do, how you engage with the community might change.
Mm,
So yeah, so the relationships, I think, going through a difficult period as part of a below process is pretty much to be expected, I think.
mm,
Um, so the statue is on the cover of the book, and I talk about the statue in the book. It's kind of like my own personal um, totem or symbol
mm.
that came to me, that may or may not make sense for anybody else. But since she was so important in my own imagery, I kind of put her on the cover of the book. So the story of the statue is that I had a kind of a vision um, early on in the opening up of the below. I had this vision, for me as an entities person, I had visions of spirits and deities and different kinds of entities all the time. And the main one, the most kind of powerful recurring vision was of um, this goddess with whose lower half of the body was the below and upper half of the body was the above.
Yeah.
So it's this very kind of um, powerful symbol for me, where the lower half of the woman's body from the waist down was actually like a snake body going down
Mm,
into the earth, and then it had a female form in the torso, human female
mm,
form in the torso, and then up above, from the shoulders up, just like turned into just was like sunlight, just like rays of light. So that was this image that I had in my mind. And one of the things I tell people to do, because it can kind of, that associative process where you try to find more and more associations with um your experiences in the below, rather than try to explain them. Try to just sort of like unpack your experiences with more and more possibilities. And so, one of the things that I was doing was just sort of like looking at pictures of goddesses online to see if I could find a picture of a goddess that had a serpent lower half and a,
mm,
sun upper half. Um, and I looked through a lot of images of goddesses from around the world, and wasn't really able to find one that exactly kind of fit with what my vision looked like, until I hit upon the idea that maybe it was actually some details from one of the visions told me to look um, in pre-Columbian uh, South American indigenous tradition, and specifically to look at the Chibcha people, which is the ancestry on my mother's father's side. I have
That's very special. Yeah.
uh, yeah. So I don't I want to make clear that um, I was not raised with any kind of Chibcha tradition whatsoever. I don't identify as Chibcha, but there is
Interesting.
in my grandfather was half Chibcha, so it's there in my ancestry. So
You connected with it in a very,
yeah, so I thought like, oh well, let me look and see if they have
yeah,
any um, goddess like this, and sure enough,
yeah.
just typed a couple keywords in Spanish into Google, and I was looking at this statue, and so the
Found her.
statue, yeah, and the statue is exactly what my image was.
Oh.
The statue is made in the 1930s by a Colombian artist, but it's a depiction of the Chibcha mother goddess, and so this image became so powerful for me just
Mm,
personally, so
mm,
personally symbolic that she sort of like yeah, became my like a major touchstone for my
yeah.
vi-
Representing what you're talking about
visions,
here.
representing exactly what I'm talking about. And so I include her image. People can check her out in the book, and she's yeah, she's lower part of her body is serpent rising out of the waters in this case, and her torso is a human woman, and then she kind of goes up into a sun. She's wearing like a sun god mask
Mm,
from the pre-Columbian culture. So
mm.
yeah. So anyway,
Okay, beautiful.
yeah, she represents the whole thing to me, the
The
above, the middle, and
whole
the
thing.
below. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
that's
above, the
with
middle,
good
and the below.
symbols. It just boils it down.
Yeah. Yeah, and lots of and actually, this is just a point, I don't make in the book, but if you look at goddess images from around the world, you can find a lot of them that embody the above. So like Virgin Mary and Guan Yin and other kinds of goddesses that are very above like. And you can find goddesses that are very below like. So goddesses like, the Morrigan in Celtic tradition and Kali in Indian tradition and so forth are much more below.
Yeah.
Um, it's very special, I think. This Chibcha mother goddess, her name is Batue. She's really special because she really clearly embodies the whole spectrum from above to below. So,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's where we want to end up for sure with the
yeah,
integration, like you said.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, yeah,
So,
she's symbolizing that integration
yeah,
in one
yeah.
figure. Yeah.
So I regret to inform everyone that we are at the top of of the hour. I'm not sure where we are with actual time because we started a little later. But we're wrapping up, and I just wanted to say something about your astrology, Oholomo, and I can't say your name still. I'm sorry about that. Oh, Oholomo.
Oholomo, yeah,
Oholomo.
Oholomo,
Oh, I almost said
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah,
It's a little different every time I say it. Oholomo.
yeah.
Yeah, and I did receive your at least almost birth time, so I appreciate that because that um tells me that your son, you're a Virgo son, and that's good for writing, for example. It's good for many things, but anyway, that is in the 12th house, and so uh, this Piscean, this the 12th house is the Piscean archetype, and so it's very prominent in your chart because you also have Jupiter and Pisces. That's square to your notes. Um, just meaning that, yeah, what can we say? We can say uncontrollable flood of water. We could say that. It's definitely water related. And symbolically, because in evolutionary astrology we see the chart as a past life imprint. That's what you come in with in this lifetime of soul memories from other incarnations, and that could have to do with, of course, we could think spirituality now that you are who you are, right? But it could also be, at least in the beginning, that you had drowned in collective thinking, that kind of symbolism, and then discovering this deep spiritual yearning to follow the truth rather than to be secure. And and then, yeah, the Piscean wisdom is that truth is a knowledge that can't just be felt by the senses, not just be something we can't only touch with our senses anyway, and that we have to face the great unknown is also a Piscean word, the great unknown.
Hmm.
And so I felt when I looked at your chart, I got this feeling that there could have been in the beginning a great trust in maybe a god or an ideology, something, but then that could also include a denial of what's really going on, and then because of that, then it's easier to push someone into situations where others are making the decisions for you. And so the higher path, which you are obviously living out, is to realize this larger reality and this, yeah, actually, as a superpower that you have is that you have a higher access to communicate with the divine when you are living your fullest. Because yeah, Jupiter in Pisces, it's very spiritual, it's very open like that when it's lived out like that, because everything has a process in it. And so the path is rather than drowning in someone else's thinking or belief system, is your own communication with the spiritual side. You can call it like that. And
Hmm.
and that means also that your soul also knows that kind of void of meaning, because when it has not been there, when it has not unfolded in that way, that leaves you with that void of meaning, right? If you're just following someone else's thinking.
Hmm.
Is there anything you can recognize from that?
Well, I think it's quite on point actually, and maybe this brings us back to where we started. So um, the the I was talking about like moving through the fear, the abyss of fear, and kind of discovering the gifts at the bottom of the below, and then bringing those back up to the middle, right? So I was
Mm.
mentioning that earlier. Um, and and for me, this is just my own personal story, but a lot of this journey, was I was more oriented towards the above, and this a lot of this journey just kind of happened spontaneously, and it had a lot of fear for me. The fear abyss was quite quite deep, quite fearful. But really, the discovery on the other side, and just um the clarity of what needed to be done was the discovery of this voice, um this ability to be able to communicate this information,
Yeah.
um you know and it really has been kind of like a flood, because because I feel like the
Okay.
Oholomo material, maybe another reason for not putting my own name on it is because I do feel like it has kind of been in a sense channeled from somewhere. It's just this is
Yeah.
sort of like, um as soon as I started writing this book, it just like what flowed out in this kind of uncontrollable um tsunami wave
Ah.
of a um channeled sort of like downloaded kind of material just kind of poured out of me.
Mm.
um and and then the idea, the knowledge was so clear that this had to be put out into the world, even um, even though I don't know how it'll be received. I don't know,
Yeah.
what whether people will find it or not, but it just like it had to come out.
Yeah.
So yeah, in a sense, what you're talking about, I think is quite spot on. And also, in the sense that this message is also kind of getting us out from under. You said the other people's words, right? Other people's models, the existing
Yeah.
models of spirituality, the existing models of, above
Yes.
centric approaches. And this material is just kind of like, yeah, a tsunami wave that's kind of washing away, washing away um, these ideas that I held on to for so long.
Mm.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the metaphors
Yeah.
are,
Thank you
there's
for
the metaphors are
relating.
in alignment.
Good, good. Thank you for relating to it like that. That
Yeah.
helps my understanding as well, really. Yeah, that's really good. And when there is that square to the notes and just also several signatures in the chart saying the same thing, then we know this is really important. This is really important for the soul to complete this.
Yeah.
So,
Let me say one more thing on
yeah.
that. Just if I was going to summarize in a kind of a crystallized kind of way what that process is like is, so I would say that at the bottom of the abyss of fear, it turns out that the thing you feared the most, the the existential fear that is so terrifying at the bottom of the abyss, turns out to be the gift
Mm.
that you need to bring back. And so for me, my fear was of going mad. Right? My fear
Yeah,
was that I'm losing my mind. My fear was that all of this stuff that's happening in the below is a sign, that I'm actually insane.
yeah.
Um, and so in a way, the realization at the bottom of the abyss is that my madness is the gift that I need to bring to the world. Right.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's something like that taking place in the abyss. It's like the very core thing that your
Mm.
ego is most afraid of is the thing that you find at the bottom that you need to bring back.
I love that.
Yeah.
Then
So
I have many gifts because I have many fears.
well, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to bring bring this
Yeah, for
this
sure.
material forward.
And another Piscean word is surrender. So I
Mm.
feel it is. I see it all through the book, and it's such. I'm just so happy that it came my way. So thank you for coming my way.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. It's wonderful, wonderful opportunity. It's very nice to meet you. Yeah, thanks for doing
Yeah.
this.